Pokémon games are completely insane. They're so far away from the conventions and standards of every other type of game that they occupy not only their own genre, but their own dimension within video games. Their flagship AAA games are renowned for being lazy cash grabs. They sell their titles as two separate, incomplete versions, and their idea of gameplay is rock, paper, scissors, except you know what your opponent is choosing. And yet the franchise is so huge and the community so devout that each game is a guaranteed success before it's even announced. Their cult-like following has allowed them to stagnate, causing them to make the same game over and over for 25 years. A power fantasy pet simulator RPG collectathon for very young children. When viewed in this light, the popularity of Pokémon games begins to make sense. We all played them as little kids, and they empowered us until we felt like the smartest, strongest trainers in the world, and in return, we worshipped them. Even in terms of my own life, Pokémon shaped me so much. Yellow was the first game I ever owned, and as a 4-year-old, it was the only game I could play without needing my older brother to do everything for me. And then Ruby was the first game that I completed fully by myself on my own console. If Pokémon was slightly more challenging, and I hadn't experienced progressing through a game by myself, I could have given up on games entirely and never learned to appreciate them in the way I do now. Pokémon is everyone's first video game love, and the memories and bonds we make playing it stay with us for the rest of our lives. The people I played Pokémon with when I was 10 still play it to this day, and the popularity of Pokémon Go in 2016 stands as testament to the adoration this series has even among people that haven't picked up a controller in more than a decade. Unfortunately, I'm not 10 anymore, but even now, while the gameplay and world building and popularity and huge wasted potential of newer Pokémon games makes my adult brain have an aneurysm, there's still something so compelling about the idea of raising and managing a team of animals to take part in brutal blood sports. And after diving headfirst into emulation and ROM hacks, I discovered a game called Pokémon Unbound. Pokémon Unbound is a fan-made ROM hack of Fire Red, and it is also the very best Pokémon game I've ever played. It shows an intense love for the series as a whole, but also shows a game that was made by someone who really cares about the end product. Unbound has auto-run and a quest log, and when you want to use a HM it'll just happen instead of having to click through 5 different text boxes confirming it. It has difficulty settings for both battles and puzzles, and full party XP share with an optional level cap because enemies grow in power as you do, and the ability to quick throw Pokeballs and a ton of other tiny little improvements that make it so much more playable. Instead of saying stuff like "I love Pokemon" or "use Pokeballs to catch Pokemon," Unbound's NPCs have witty and charming dialogue that isn't afraid to poke fun at itself or the ridiculousness of Pokemon as a whole. Perhaps even more surprising is that the main story is actually good. The characters have interesting and believable motivations behind their actions, and I was fully invested in the narrative by its conclusion. On the whole, it comes across as a genuine world and story written by a real human being, rather than a formulaic product that's been through 10 teams of marketing censors to ensure maximum engagement with brand merchandise. Really though, what made me fall in love with Unbound is just how much thought and care has went into the gameplay itself, giving it that inescapable sense of adventure that we feel in our hearts while thinking about Pokemon. For example, in Dresco Town, which houses the first gym, you can find a man who offers to trade you his Ducklet for a rare Ice-type Sandshrew. Being the obsessive quest finisher I am, I quickly traded him my Sandshrew and got his Quacker and thought nothing more of it. Yet when I turned up at the Dresco gym and found it completely hotboxed, I felt so proud of myself because the Ducklet I had just received came with Defog pre-installed. Unbound is full of these completely optional player choices and details that help flesh out the world of Boreas and reverberate out like ripples on a pond to make every playthrough unique. Quacker helped me in that gym, and then also became my best and most loved Pokemon. And it's the only game I've played where you can both smuggle drugs and babysit. As for the battling, I played the game on difficult, and I couldn't help thinking that if all Pokemon games were designed with this much ingenuity or passion, that I would definitely still be playing them today. Not only are trainer teams much more balanced on the whole, i.e. their fire type will have an electric move to counter your water type. But the game is constantly throwing you curveballs with different rule sets for gym battles that make the standard rock, paper, scissors but you know what your opponent is choosing formula much more engaging. For example, the electric type gym has a flaw that makes all electric types levitate, removing their usually easily exploitable weakness to ground type moves. Even as I'm writing it, I'm shocked by how simple yet ingenious it is. And I'm even more shocked that this isn't a one-off situation. Every gym in the game has a unique mechanic that will push your skills as a Pokemoner to their limits. Where the gym leaders in normal games design their party around one type with glaring weaknesses, and are still somehow put in charge of an entire building, the intensely thoughtful design of Unbound lends a huge amount of legitimacy to the world as a whole. Instead of being a 10-year-old Mozart poker prodigy that is already better than the best trainers in the world at the profession they've dedicated their lives to, in Unbound other trainers have brains that understand type matchups, and won't put out a team that a literal 4-year-old could beat. Where one feels like a farce of a situation, the other feels like a rewarding experience in a believable world. If anything, I found its realistic and forthright implementation of the complex mechanics that exist in the shadows of every Pokemon game overwhelming. I spent so much time looking up stuff like EVs, IVs, and Pokerus that I still don't know if I'm qualified enough to appreciate just how good this game is. In a way, that's the beauty of such a devoted community, where fans will unearth the obscure and vague numbers that make up a game's code, so that ordinary players like myself can make informed decisions about how to play the game. Putting it bluntly, Unbound forced me to engage with, and most importantly enjoy, the underlying systems of Pokemon in a way I'd never been able to before. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that deep down, I still love Pokemon. And Pokémon Unbound is the Pokemon game I've wanted since I was 13 years old. Its quality gameplay and world building made it my second most played game of 2022, and more importantly, made it an experience I want to share with the world. If official Pokemon games were half as good as this, I'd still be buying them today, and I wouldn't even be ashamed of it. At the end of the day, Unbound makes me incredibly grateful that I get to live in a world where I can experience intricate, beautiful fan-made projects, brimming with creativity and passion, that fill me with joy, and remind me why I fell in love with this series all those years ago. Thank you to Skelly and everyone that worked on Pokémon Unbound. Thank you to Quacker for carrying me through the game. And thank you for watching. Peace.